I met my husband at a 4th of July barbecue in the summer of 1987. I was 34 years old, working as a medical transcriptionist at a hospital in Tucson, Arizona, and I had just about given up on the idea that I would ever find someone worth giving up my quiet Saturday mornings. His name was Vincent. He was standing by the grill holding a paper plate and talking about baseball with someone's uncle, and he had this way of laughing, head back, completely unself-conscious, that made me want to know what the joke was. We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. He walked me to my car. He called the next day. I thought I had won something. Vincent's family had come from Naples in the 1950s. His parents had settled in South Tucson, raised 4 kids, never fully let go of the old country. His mother, who everyone called Nonna, even though she wasn't anyone's grandmother yet, spoke Italian at home the way some people keep a candle burning, constantly, quietly, like it would go out if she stopped. Vincent was fluent. His sisters were fluent. Even his youngest brother, who had been born here and claimed he didn't care about any of it, would slip into Italian when he was angry or tired or happy enough to forget himself. I didn't speak a word of it. I told Vincent this on our second date, and he smiled and said, "That's okay. I'll teach you." He never did. We got married in April of 1989. I was 36. The ceremony was at a small church near his parents' house, and the reception was loud and warm and full of relatives I hadn't met yet. I remember feeling, that night, like I was being folded into something larger than myself. I thought that was love. I was wrong about what kind of love it was. The first years were fine, or they seemed fine, the way a house seems fine before you notice the foundation. We bought a place in the northeast part of Tucson, a 3-bedroom ranch house with a big mesquite tree in the backyard. I kept my job. Vincent worked in commercial real estate. We had a good income between us. That's what I thought anyway. What I didn't understand, not for a long time, was that Vincent had a very specific idea of how money was supposed to work in a marriage. His father had handled all the finances in their household. His mother had never had her own bank account. It wasn't discussed. It was simply the way things were. And Vincent, without ever sitting me down and explaining this, without ever asking whether I agreed, simply began arranging our life the same way. It happened so gradually that I didn't see it happening. My paychecks went into a joint account. The bills came out of that account. Groceries, utilities, the mortgage, all of it was handled, he said. And I didn't need to worry about it. When I needed cash for something, I asked him. He was never cruel about it. He would hand me what I needed, and sometimes a little extra, and tell me to enjoy myself. It felt, at first, like being taken care of. It took me years to understand the difference between being taken care of and being managed. I asked once, maybe 2 years in, if I could have my own checking account. Just for small things, I said. Personal things. He looked at me the way you look at a child who has said something that doesn't quite make sense, patient and slightly confused, and said, "What do you need a separate account for? We're a team." I didn't push it. I told myself he was right. We were a team. I let it go. His mother's name was Adriana. She was a small, sharp-featured woman who wore her silver hair pinned back and kept her opinions about everything, including me, close to the surface. She never said anything outright cruel to my face. She was too smart for that. She would compliment my cooking in a tone that made it sound like a surprise. She would ask about my family in a way that made my family seem lesser for not being Italian. And then she would turn to Vincent and speak to him in Italian, quickly, quietly, and whatever she said would make him look at the floor or change the subject or suddenly remember somewhere else he needed to be. I always smiled. I always pretended not to notice. The truth is, I did notice. I just didn't know what I was noticing. By the time we had been married for 10 years, I had stopped asking about money. I had stopped asking about a lot of things. I had learned, without anyone teaching me, how to make myself smaller. I told myself this was compromise. I told myself this was maturity. I told myself that every marriage has accommodations, and this was simply mine. We tried to have children for most of the 1990s, 2 miscarriages, one in 1992 and one in 1994. A round of fertility treatments that left me exhausted and hopeful, and then devastated in a way that I have never fully been able to describe. Vincent was not unkind during those years. He was present, but there were moments, a particular silence after the second miscarriage, a way he answered his mother's questions about when we would have children, a sigh he couldn't quite suppress that settled somewhere in me and stayed. His mother during those years had taken to calling more often. She and Vincent would talk on the phone in Italian, sometimes for an hour, while I sat in the next room watching television and pretending not to be aware of the shape of things I couldn't understand. I would catch words sometimes, the word for children, the word for family, the word for waiting, and I would feel a chill that I talked myself out of every time. I want to say that I had a moment of clear decision. A day I woke up and thought, I'm going to learn Italian and I'm going to know, once and for all, what has been said in front of me all these years. But it wasn't like that. It was smaller than that and sadder. It started with an audio program. I found it at the library in 2001, a set of CDs for learning conversational Italian. I checked them out and drove home with them in the passenger seat, feeling slightly ridiculous. I told myself I was doing it because I wanted to connect with Vincent's family. I told myself it was about belonging. I listened to those CDs during my lunch breaks at work, parked in the hospital lot with the windows up, practicing phrases in a voice barely above a whisper. Buongiorno, prego, come stai mai scusi. I felt foolish, but I kept going. By the end of that year, I had bought a grammar workbook. By 2003, I was watching Italian films with English subtitles, then without. By 2005, I was reading Italian newspapers online, slowly, with a dictionary open beside me, building vocabulary word by word like someone laying tile. I never told Vincent. I don't know exactly why. Part of it was that I was ashamed of what I thought I might find. Part of it was that I had already understood, somewhere below the place where understanding is comfortable, that I was doing this because I needed to know, and that wanting to know meant I already suspected something. He didn't notice. That's the part that still catches me sometimes. He didn't notice. I was his wife for all those years, and he didn't notice that I had become someone who could understand everything he said. It was a Sunday in October of 2017. We were at Adriana's house for her 85th birthday, a small gathering, just family, the way she preferred it. Vincent's sister had made pasta, his brother had brought wine, and there was that particular noise of an Italian family gathering, overlapping and warm on the surface and layered underneath with old dynamics that I had spent 30 years trying to decode. I was in the kitchen refilling my glass of water when Vincent and his mother moved to the hallway just outside the door. I don't think they believed I was close enough to hear. I don't think it occurred to them, after all this time, to check. His mother said, in Italian, that he had sacrificed enough. She said that a man like him deserved children, a real family, not a woman who had given him a house and a paycheck, and nothing else. She said he had stayed out of loyalty, and she respected that. But loyalty had a limit, and she was not going to be here forever, and she wanted to see him live before she was gone. Vincent said, quietly, that it wasn't that simple. His mother said it was exactly that simple. His mother said it was exactly that simple. She said I had never understood what this family was. She said I had never tried. I stood at the kitchen counter with my hand around the glass and I didn't move, not because I was frozen, because I was, for the first time in a very long time, completely certain of something. I was certain that I had been right to feel what I had felt all those years. I was certain that the small, cold thing that had lived in my chest since sometime in the 1990s was not paranoia and was not my fault. I was certain that I had spent 30 years being patient in a house that had never quite been mine. I refilled my glass. I walked back to the living room. I sat down next to Vincent's sister and asked her about her grandchildren. I smiled at everything she said. I drove home that night thinking about a woman I had worked with at the hospital years ago, a woman who had gone back to school at 58 and become a nurse practitioner. I had thought she was brave. I had thought, how does someone do that? Now I thought I understood. You do it when the thing you've been waiting for turns out to be the wrong thing. I want to be careful here, because I know what this sounds like. It sounds like a story about a villain. Vincent was not a villain. He was a man who had absorbed a set of beliefs about how a marriage worked from a family that held those beliefs deeply, and he had never examined them because he had never needed to. He was not cruel. He was not unfaithful, as far as I knew. He provided. He came home. He sat across from me at dinner for 3 decades. But here is what I have come to understand about quiet harm. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive at the door with its intentions visible. It settles in slowly, like a drop in temperature, and by the time you realize how cold you are, you've forgotten what warm felt like. I made an appointment with an attorney in January of 2018. Her office was in a building downtown with good light and a waiting room that had fresh flowers on the table, which I noticed because it seemed like someone was trying to make a difficult thing feel manageable. I sat across from her and told her what I knew about our finances, which turned out to be less than I had thought, because I had spent nearly 30 years not asking. What I learned over the following weeks was clarifying in the way that painful things sometimes are. The joint account I had contributed to for 29 years had a balance I had never been shown. The retirement accounts were in Vincent's name. The equity in the house was something I had rights to, my attorney explained carefully, but accessing those rights would require a process. I listened to all of it with my hands in my lap and my face very still, and I thought, I am 64 years old, and I am starting from a place I should have demanded to understand 30 years ago. I filed for divorce in March of 2018. Vincent was stunned. I know that's strange, that a man can live alongside someone for 29 years and still be stunned when that person decides to leave. But he was. He called his sister. His sister called me. She said that his mother was heartbroken. I told her gently that I was sorry to hear that. I was. The divorce took 11 months. Arizona is a community property state, which my attorney explained meant that assets acquired during the marriage were generally split equally, regardless of whose name was on what. I received half the equity in the house, half the value of the retirement accounts, and a settlement that, while not lavish, meant that I was not starting from nothing. I was 65 years old when the divorce was finalized. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Tucson in February of 2019. I bought furniture I chose myself. I opened a bank account in my name. I learned that a checking account in your own name, which is the most ordinary thing in the world, can feel, when you have not had one for most of your adult life, like a door opening into a room you didn't know was there. I went back to work full-time. I had reduced my hours over the years. Vincent had suggested it, said we didn't need the income, said I should take it easy. Another thing I had accommodated. My supervisor was kind about it, and I was grateful, because gratitude was something I had plenty of at that point. I was grateful for the work. I was grateful for my paycheck going into an account that was mine. I was grateful for every small thing that was simply, plainly mine. I started a beginner's Italian class at the community college that fall. Not because I needed to, I had been studying on my own for 17 years, but I wanted to sit in a room with other people who were learning, who were beginning something, and feel that I was among them. The instructor was a young man from Milan who was surprised after the first session when I answered a question in Italian that he had only asked once. He asked me afterward how long I had been studying. I said, "A while." People ask me sometimes what I would tell someone in the situation I was in. They ask it the way people ask things they hope will have a clean answer, something that can be applied like a formula. I never know what to say because the true answer is not clean. The true answer is that I stayed for reasons that seemed good at the time, and that staying for reasons that seem good is not the same thing as staying for the right reasons, and I did not know the difference for a long time. What I know now is this: the moment I walked back into that living room with my glass of water, having understood every word, something in me was already gone. Not the marriage. The marriage had been going for a long time. Something in me that had been waiting. Some patient, careful thing that had been holding its breath since sometime in the 1990s finally let it out. I'm 71 now. I live in the same apartment. I have a small garden on the balcony where I grow basil and cherry tomatoes because I can and because I like to. I speak Italian reasonably well. I have not spoken to Vincent in 4 years, and I don't experience this as loss. I experience it as weather that has passed. There is a particular freedom in being a woman past 60 who has stopped organizing herself around someone else's comfort. I didn't expect to find it this way. I would not have chosen this path if another one had been available. But I am here, and I am in a room of my own, and the door is not locked. It never was. I just didn't know I could open it. I've had a lot of time to think about cause and effect, not in any mystical sense, just the plain, ordinary way that choices stack up over decades and become the walls of the room you're living in. Vincent didn't set out to diminish me. I believe that. He grew up watching his father handle everything and his mother ask for nothing, and he absorbed that as the natural shape of a marriage, the way children absorb language, without questioning it, without even knowing they're learning. Adriana didn't set out to be cruel. She loved her son completely, and she measured everything else by how well it served that love. Neither of them were monsters. They were just people who had never been asked to examine the assumptions they were living by. And this is the part I have to sit with, I never asked them to. I accommodated. I smiled. I made myself smaller year by year and courted being a good wife. That's the thing about quiet patterns. They don't feel like harm while they're happening. They feel like normal. And normal is the hardest thing to question, because questioning it means admitting that something has been wrong for a very long time, and that admission carries weight. What changed for me wasn't the moment I heard Adriana's words at that birthday party, though that moment mattered. What changed was what happened inside me in the seconds after, because I understood her. Every word clearly after 17 years of study I had kept entirely to myself, and I realized that I had known, somewhere deeper than language, what she thought of me all along. The Italian hadn't kept me in the dark. I had kept myself there because knowing for certain would have required me to act. That's the honest part. That's the part I don't say out loud very often. Tritugsa, I've come to believe, is not what you know. It's what you're willing to know. I spent 17 years quietly building a skill, learning grammar, vocabulary, the rhythms of a language, but I was also, without fully admitting it to myself, building the courage to use it. The studying wasn't just studying. It was me, slowly becoming someone who could bear the truth. And that's what I'd want anyone to take from this. If they're in a place that feels airless and permanent, the thing you're doing quietly, the thing you haven't told anyone about, the small effort you make every day that doesn't seem to add up to anything yet, it is adding up. It is adding up into a version of you that will eventually be able to stand in a hallway and hear a difficult thing and not fall apart. Endurance isn't passivity. Sometimes it's preparation. I filed for divorce at 64. I opened my own bank account. I sat in a community college classroom and conjugated Italian verbs next to people decades younger than me. None of it was graceful. All of it was mine. I am 71 now, and I live in a place I chose, among things I chose, in a life that fits the shape of who I actually am, rather than who someone needed me to be. That did not happen by accident. It happened because one day I stopped waiting for circumstances to change and started changing them, one quiet decision at a time, 1 year at a time, 1 year at a time, one word at a time. The door was never locked. I just had to build the strength to reach for it.